Olá. Bom dia,
Bom dia,
tudo bem?
tudo bem?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning for those of you who are in Brazil. I'm in Germany, so for me, it's already good afternoon. I've had lunch already. So, welcome. My name is Marcela, and I'm the president of Coaching in Autistic. And I'm very, very happy to be here today. It's a great accomplishment for us to have people talking about coaching because coaching, I don't know why there is this blur idea about coaching still in our field. And those of us who are already using coaching know how much our students can profit and benefit from coaching tools and techniques in the classroom. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk about it, to share, and to learn from teachers who are already with a little bit more experience with coaching in the classroom. So I'd like to welcome Maira Elliott, who's going to be our first speaker for today. We already have in the room Tania de Chiaro, who's going to be the second speaker. And later we're going to have also Gabriella Kovács. She is not Brazilian, she's Australian, but she's going to share some different perspectives on coaching from the other side of the world. Actually, she's here in Europe, but she has quite some experience with coaching as well. So welcome, everyone. Let's get started. Maira, please introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. What an opportunity to be talking about coaching in ELT. As Marcela has said, it's great to use coaching with our students. They can really benefit from these strategies that we can apply with them, right? So today we are all going to be sharing great things that you can go on and apply with your students. And this is the thing. Well, my name is Maira, just like Marcela said, and I've been a coach for about 2.5 years now, and I've been using these techniques and strategies with my students successfully so far. I have also got a company called Elliott Solutions, which is specialized in providing coaching solutions for teachers, right? Especially in their career and directing them to what would be the best solution for them, what would be the best options for them, right? I graduated in languages here at USP. I'm speaking from São Paulo. Yes, so this is good morning for me. And I've also got an specialization in psychology education, right? And this is it. So let's get started, right? Today, I'll be talking a little bit about behavioral patterns of our students and how that can influence our lessons and the way we deal with them and how we can help them, right? So this is the first thing. Let me see if I can get to, I cannot really share the screen.
Okay, can you try again, Maira? See if it works. If not, I can share for you.
It says it's disabled.
Okay, so I'll do it and then you let me know what you need me to do, okay?
All right.
All right, just a second. So before we start officially with Maira's presentation, I'd like to remind you that we are going to have other SIGs presenting, and all the events are free for BRAZ-TESOL members, and for those who are not members yet, it's just a very small fee, but I really recommend you do become a member because there are so many advantages for people who are part of such a great organization. It's important to be part of a group where people think alike and where you can share and learn, because sometimes teachers work privately, like in my case, so we kind of feel lonely, and it's good to have a group of people who we can share and learn with, right? So Let me share my screen and we'll get started. There you go.
All right, so perfect. The different behavioral patterns of our students and how they might impact our lessons, right? For this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on this behavioral pattern theory that's called DISC, okay? But before we move on and before we start, you can move on to the next one there. I would like to ask you, how could we define behavior, right? So what is behavior? Usually we are going to consider behavior as something that, oh, the student is behaving well, oh, he's a quiet student, especially when we are thinking of schools, in the school classroom, oh, he's quiet, he's paying attention, so he has a good behavior. Or if the student is misbehaving, well, this student is really disruptive, he won't stop talking, and anything like that. Well, here, I would like to go a little bit deeper into this definition of behavior, okay? And then the definition that I got comes from the Brazilian Coaching Society, right? SBC here in Brazil, Sociedade Brasileira de Coaching. That is going to be in the next slide. So we can say that here, human behavior can be defined as a set of all physical and emotional actions that are related to an individual or even to a social group. Meaning, we in our society, we have some behaviors that are accepted and others that are not. So it is more connected to what I have just said. However, yeah, we still have, in other words, the way our responses to different daily stimuli from both internal and external sources. So how do we respond to some of the environment? How do we respond to people? How do we act or react in some ways, okay? And this is the kind of behavior that I would like you to keep in mind, the definition of behavior I would like you to keep in mind throughout this presentation today, okay? More than that, now that we have the definition of behavior, why should we know more about these patterns? Why should we, as teachers, apply those patterns there? Well, knowing more about those patterns would make it possible for us to adapt our lessons, for us to personalize our lessons, and be better able to help our students in a way that they can have more better productivity, they can enjoy our lessons more, they will be able to achieve the tasks in an easier way, and they will be more engaged in the lessons. The lessons would be more meaningful for all of them, okay? And in this presentation, I have there 3 questions I would like to have answered by the end of it, right? So the 3 questions are in the next slide. When did it all begin? So when did this study about behavioral patterns start? Okay. What are some of those behavioral patterns? Yes. And how they can help us with our students. So some really pragmatic things. So what can we do in our classroom today that we can help our students already see and visualize how they can better do in English when learning English? Okay. So first of all, in the next slide, we start a long time ago. We go back to Mesopotamia, we go back to Egypt, to all of those ancient peoples and the belief that they had about the 4 elements, being them fire, air, water, and earth. Yeah. These 4 elements, according to them, would regulate somehow people's behaviors, right? So depending on these elements, we would behave in a certain way. And later on, also the Greek, just like Empedocles, would be studying how these elements would manifest in some people with a certain dominance and in some others not with a certain dominance. So some people would be more likely to have the fire as a dominant element And he observed that these people would be associated with the fire characteristics, that is hot and dry. So we can say that hot because they are people who are very, quick making decisions. They are very impulsive. And they are also dry because sometimes they can be a little bit blunt. They would sound a little bit blunt. The air, another characteristic, the air people that would have this influence, they would also be hot, so they would make decisions quickly, but they would be humid, so they would be a little bit more fluid, possibly, okay? The water as well, they would also be a little bit more fluid, but they would be cold. So the decision making there would be, a little bit more rational, not so emotional. And finally, earth would be the people who are also a little bit dry, so straight to the point, sometimes a little bit blunt, and they are also cold, so they think more before making any kind of decisions. They have also started studying and relate the four elements to medicine. So, for example, the people who would have fire there as a dominant element in their character, they would possibly have more yellow bile in their body. So the digestive enzymes and so on. So these people, they believed, were more likely to have stomach aches and so on. The second one, the air, they would have there the blood carrying the air all over their bodies and so on. So they could have some sort of characteristics. They would even study their nose format, the shapes and so on. The water, they associated with the phlegm. The phlegm would be some kind of mucus or plasma that we have in our body. Yeah, so these people, they would have a larger quantity of those in their bodies, and that element would be dominant in their personality, in their behavior. Finally, the earth. The earth, they would associate with harder parts of our body, yeah, parts that last longer, so just like the bones, the joints, so things that are more dense and solid. So this person tends to be a little bit more rigid, a little bit more demanding too, yeah. Later on, Steiner and also Waldorf have studied this, and they have taken these elements into education, to their pedagogy and so on. I'm not going to go deep into that, but it's good if you are curious about that, you can go on and study more and check it out, right? Still in Greece, in the next slide, we are going to see that Hippocrates, the father of medicine, so around 370 BCE, he started associating those four elements to some temperaments that people could have. And then he would have the choleric people, those people who are energetic and impulsive, the sanguine. He called the people who would have the air as dominant the sanguine. They would be more playful, carefree, yes? The phlegmatic, those are the people who are connected to water. They are much more receptive, they are adaptable, they are persistent people. And finally, we have the melancholic type. The melancholic, they tend to be, according to him, more anxious, serious. They are also more thoughtful, yeah? And they would have the earth as a dominant element there. Hippocrates also believed that it would be ideal for every individual to have all of these elements balanced. Okay, so he would recommend some of the things, and that's how he started medicine there, right? Galen has brought it all back during the Renaissance period. That's when they brought it back. And later on, already in the 20th century, Carl Jung, that's in the next slide, brought this reason about choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic, yes? So Carl Jung, in the next slide, he starts observing his patients, his psychiatric patients, and he starts observing that they have some certain tendencies of introversion and extroversion. Besides that, he also sees that all of them have this basic, what we call basic psychological functions. These basic psychological functions are intuition. Intuition is someone who has quick assimilation of things, yeah? Feeling, the feeling, when you make decisions with the feeling, they tend to be a little bit more subjective. They tend to be more based on loyalty. So if you're willing to trust someone or not. So that's how you're going to make your decisions. Sensation would be the next one. Sensation would gather the information from outside. So they need facts, they need some sort of evidence to sustain their decision, right? To support their decision there. And finally, thinking. Thinking would be making decisions carefully, looking at every detail and trying to connect things in a logical manner. Yeah. And this way that I have put there, associating with all of the elements from the first slide, and even with the temperaments from the second slide, they are all based in the separation proposed by Catherine Basinger. However, we must here be attentive and pay attention to the fact that intuition, feeling, sensation, and thinking, they may also be for introversion and extroversion. That's why it's not 100% match. It's not possible to say, wow, this is perfect and so on, okay? But it's a possible, it's the closest one that we have got. And why is it important to bring Jung here then, if it's not a perfect match? Because Jung was the first one observing this, and he would also not only consider the external facts, so it's not only about the stimuli from the external aspects that we react to, but there is also something within us, something that's innate, that influences our decisions, that influences our behaviors. So he was the first one to observe that, and that's why I bring Carl Jung here. About these, you may have seen a test called 16 Personalities. It's on the internet. And this test is based on this idea of introversion, extroversion, intuition, feeling, sensation, and thinking, brought by Carl Jung, okay? So it's called Myers-Briggs. I guess it's Myers-Briggs, the specialists who have brought up this test, okay? Finally, moving on then to our creator of the disc. This is William Marston, right? So it's still in the 20th century. Carl Jung came up with his theory of introversion and extroversion around 1913, 1920s. And William Marston, also a psychologist, started studying, and he thought to himself, just like, well, they are studying people who have got some issues. So they were psychiatric patients. But what about the people who are not psychiatric patients? What about them? Yes. Do they react in the same way? Do they feel in the same way? So he started developing a study about that. And as a result, he published his first book called Emotions of Normal People in 1928. And in these emotions of normal people, he starts describing these 4 behavioral patterns. The one that's dominance, influence, stability. Sometimes you may find it as steadiness. Compliance, sometimes you may find it as conscientiousness, right? So DISC comes from there. So that's the abbreviation. Was he the one who created the DISC test? No. He created a theory. Later on, some other people started studying his theory and created this test, okay? He also believed that there could be some kind of balance if people could have the dominance, the influence, the stability, and compliance. Because, mind you, all of us have the 4 characteristics. However, 1 or 2 of them may be more prominent. They may be there more speaking louder in our actions, in our behaviors every day. And for you to know that he believed this so much that in the next slide, we have a character that was his creation. Wonder Woman. Yes, he's also the creator of Wonder Woman. And she has all of the four behavioral patterns balanced. So she has the dominance, she has the stability, she has the influence, and she has the compliance there, all in there. Okay, just a matter, just a curiosity. He was a feminist. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why he proposed to create a heroine, because he was tired of only having men as heroes. So he believed that women could also be heroes. So then the creation of Wonder Woman. Well, that's enough. So let's start analyzing the disc and how that applies the characteristics to our students, how that can help us better understand our students, okay? So in the next slide, we already start. Oh, yes, sorry. In the next slide, we have just a final conclusion there, just for you to have an idea of comparing all of the theories that I have talked about. So the fire, in the choleric, the intuition that is also connected to the dominance that we are going to talk more about now. The air, the sanguine, the feeling and the influence. The water, the phlegmatic, the sensation and the stability. Earth, melancholic, thinking and compliance. Remember all of those characteristics that I talked about in the beginning for each one of those theories. They are going to be there in Marston's theory as well, okay? So in the next slide, then we are going to start checking out those characteristics. So for the dominance, what are those students going to be like? What are they going to sound like? They are more confident students. They are usually energetic. They like challenges. They are competitive and audacious, fearless and brave. Well, you might be picturing some of your students already there in mind, yeah? So really, if you have those students who really speak out their minds, yes, they are going to be students that you can challenge with more activities. So it's always a good idea for you to have those extra activities, right? Especially when dealing with groups. I would recommend you had one or two extra activities showing them, oh, if you can do this, you can get better. And then they get really excited about that. Also, they need it to be just like clear goal. If you do this, you're going to do that to get that. So if in this class you do this, in the end of this class, you're going to get that. So they are goal oriented, okay? Also, they like to take part in class. They like to be in the limelight. So if you need someone to present something, to show something, call them. Oh, there needs to be a role playing in front of everyone. Call them. They will be more than glad to help. Okay. They are usually also in the leadership roles. They are class representatives. So, however, I'm going to talk when they need help a little bit more in detail, right? They are straightforward, as I said, and autonomous. So you don't need to be there checking all the time if they are or they are not doing their tasks. Well, as kids, maybe, as teenagers, maybe, but they can usually, once they get it, they start doing it. However, they need still help listening to others. As they are really straightforward, they prefer answers to be direct, straightforward as well, right? So if you have a tendency to be talking, long explanations and everything else, forget it. They are going to lose focus. They will start doing something else. Okay. So these are students that you have to really go straight to the point. Another thing is, because of this, they don't really have much patience to listen to others. As we will see later on, the other patterns, they tend to be talking more and more. So they tend to lose their patience very quickly. So helping these students, especially as kids, especially as teenagers, to listen to others, to show them the importance. So why are you listening to the other person? So what is the clear goal? Yeah, I need to listen to the other person because of this, this, and that. They also have some difficulty recognizing their own mistakes. Okay, so when you're going to show them some correction of an activity, try to show them just and go straight to the point. This is the thing, and explain to them, look, the goal of the activity, because if they know the goal of the activity before the correction, they will, okay, they will tend to respect your decision. They will tend to take that in and say, well, yes, okay, and their limitations. So putting them in the limelight and pointing out their limitations, it's not going to be so nice. So they sometimes they say, no, I can't do that, even if they can't. So they will be taking risks, even if they cannot really accomplish the task. So they might need our help in that way, in that sense. Okay, so also observe that. They also need some help slowing down, because they tend to start the task. These are those students that you have not even finished the explanation, they are already doing the task. And when they do it, the quality is sometimes poor. I'm thinking especially of teenagers, right? So go there with them, tell them to slow down, give them some lists, for example, to review their work. I used to work with the writing with this kind of students, and they had a list of correction. So common mistakes they would commit, spelling, agreement, etc. So as soon as they finished their writing, I would say, okay, so have a look at this list, because the other ones would be possibly still doing their writing, and this student would have already finished it. So go back, review this list, check if you have any kind of mistakes. So then they would go back there, and that would be an extra activity already for them. And they would feel just like, wow, the teacher's paying attention to me. Something else, these are the students that will usually challenge you. They are the students to whom you may need to show some sort of authority, yes, especially as teenagers, especially as kids, okay? So they will respect you. They will always be challenging that, but they will show some respect if you do impose limits to them, if you do show them clearly what they're expected to do. So these are some hints and tips on how to deal with students who have the dominance as one of their main behavioral patterns, okay? In the next slide, we are going to have the second one, that is the influence. They are usually very communicative, persuasive. It's that student who, when you go into the classroom, well, now we cannot really hug because of COVID, but that student who would hug you and say, oh, teacher, you are here. And they would want to talk to you about their last weekend, about what they've done, and da-da-da, da-da-da. So that's the influence student, right? They are always enthusiastic. They love to talk to everyone. They get along well with most people, yes, as long as people are there with them, receptive to, and so on. So this is a person that you can use, for example, when you are making a group, thinking of group work, to put there and connect everybody else. That could be the kind of student that could help you in group work. However, they may talk too much. So careful also about that. Okay, so take it as a grain of salt, right? But they could help you connecting the whole group. They also love to be in the limelight. So if you need someone to go in front of the class, present something, do a role play, volunteers, they are the first ones to raise their hands and to participate and to help you. They are there willing to help you, to give you some support. They have really a good level of empathy. So if you're having new students in your group, you can always count on them to introduce these new students to others, to make them feel more comfortable, and so on. Now, if you're thinking of adults, this is also the student that needs to talk, so they need some more speaking activities, right? Of course, from time to time, you also need to, cut and just like, let's move on, cut and let's move on. But this is the student that is usually going to have a certain facility in speaking, right? And they are going to enjoy lessons that bring this to their reality, right? So you can be a little bit more informal, you can use more humor. Whereas in the dominance, okay, especially when dealing with adults, You shouldn't be so informal and no, just like be straight to the point. They tend to be a little bit more formal, okay? Business-like communication. That's what they expect from you. You are the teacher, so please give me, what do I need to learn? I need to learn this, so this is it. So this is what we're doing. They are more straight to the point. This one, no, let's talk, teacher. I like you so much, enjoy your class. It's a little bit more relaxed, right? However, there's always, with the strengths, they have some weaknesses or some points that they need help with. And one of them is exactly keeping focus. Because they talk too much sometimes, they lose focus. So they start talking about one aspect, the question that you have just started the lesson with, and then they go on and on and on, and they connect to many other subjects. And then when you see, just like 15 minutes have gone, right? So that's why I say KISS, keep it simple and short. Yeah. So every time that you're going to give them any kind of instructions, do not make long instructions, detailed instructions. Simple, short instructions and straight to the point. Why? Because then they can focus, they can know better, and they will sometimes still ramble, but you can bring them back just like, so remember my question, what did you have to do exactly? Always guiding these students. Having some written lists, some written instructions, in just like short instructions can also help, especially the young ones, right? So when you're thinking of the young ones, what they need to do exactly, these lists, they help them, right? What do I need to do? So then they can check the list. You can even teach them how to check the lists, right? Make their own lists so that they don't get lost, yes, that easily. They also have sometimes a hard time dealing with emotions, okay? Why? Because they may be seen by the group as naive, as childish, and they tend to be just like more open and optimistic. So sometimes they don't see that people look at them in that way, and sometimes people may be mean. Some students, especially again, teenagers or kids even, right? So these are the kind of students that you should look out for them not to be just like so open, and helping them dealing with these emotions, because they can really get hurt and they can really cry a lot because their friends don't want to be with them, because their friends are making fun of them. Because one of the things is they always try to do their best to anyone. So if you ask them to do something, they will do something for you, and they will try their best, and they need to be approved. And because of this need of approval, sometimes people take advantage of them and they hurt these people. So that's why we should look after these students and really take care of them, especially as kids, especially as teenagers, right? As adults, they may open up sometimes in some lessons, especially private lessons. You will feel that they may be the kind of students that brings something more personal to the classroom, and check if it's possible, right? According to your schedule, according to what you have thought for their lesson, to fit it in, because they will really appreciate it, right? If you have some time to listen to them. But of course, do not make it the whole lesson and all of your lessons. Otherwise, what are you teaching them? So just like taking it and making balance, right? In the next slide, we already have the next kind, that is going to be stability or steadiness. This is the kind of student that you usually, when you go inside the classroom, they have everything ready, you know? So when I used to work, yes, in middle school, and then I had seventh grade, and those students who had their English material on the desk, they were already opening the book to the right page and everything. Good morning, teacher. These are the cutest students. They know exactly where you stopped last class, what you have to do, and so on. These are the stability students, right? They have everything planned, everything organized there. They also tend to help other students. They are really patient, right? So if you need sometimes to do some pair work, and there is a student who has a little bit more difficulty in certain subjects, you can pair them up with this kind of student. They will be more than glad to help. They will be patient and help that students because they are really calm, and they will go again and again. Remember that they can also, because of the water element, they are also persistent and so on. For new students, they are also great. So these are the calm students, easygoing, everything's perfect. They tend to show appreciation for your lessons, but they also expect you show appreciation for their work. So if you do say, wow, I loved your writing, you wrote something so nice and so on, they are going to be really glad about that because they see that you're paying attention to them and they really appreciate it, right? However, they will need some of your help when they need to focus, okay? Despite being very organized, they need a place that is very organized as well. So that chaotic classroom with the students running around, another one shouting and so on, this student is going to be completely lost. They are going to lose their focus. They are going to be completely disorganized. They won't be productive. So one of the things is trying to keep a calm environment too. Is it possible? Always, always, always. No, it's not always possible, but we try really hard to, right? So this can help them. Also multitasking, right? So when this student needs to write something and then to stand up, and these kind of activities that involve lots of things for this student is a little bit overwhelming. So when you do have this kind of multitasking, try to break it into small parts, into small chunks. So then this student will feel less stressed out. This student will feel able to do things. So, okay, so now I do this and then I do that, right? So prioritizing, help them prioritize. So which is the activity that I should do first? Because these are also the kind of students, if they have lots and lots and lots of homework, they tend to get lost. They tend to get so confused. They don't know which one to do first. So different subjects or even only English, these are the students, they tend to, okay, so, but I had this homework, but I didn't finish the other one. So which one should I do now? So these are students who will really need your guidance prioritizing things. Otherwise, they will be missing lots of deadlines. And that's not what we want, right? Because we want our students to do the best. The same thing can happen with adults, right? So if you think about your adult students, they will also need you guiding them there. So just like, okay, so you're going to do this activity first, and then if you have the time, so extra activity, you do it. If you don't have the time, because otherwise they're going to start by the extra activity, and then they are going to do the main one or not even try and do it, okay? So this is something that's also valid for adults. These students also have some sort of difficulty dealing with change because they are used to a certain routine. So if you start your lessons in the same way, or just like you have this routine on the board, especially thinking about schools, that's great. These students know exactly what's going to happen in their course. So what am I going to study? Oh, we are going to study this, and that. These are the students who like, for example, the book, and they, oh, in the next lesson, I will probably see this. So they know more or less, they can control what's going to happen. And this calms them down. This makes them produce more, right? So this is the kind of student that's not really going to profit sometimes from, oh, now we do this, now we do that. But teacher, what about the book? They are sometimes the students who are going to question you about that. Okay, so these are some ideas on how you can help students who have this pattern, stability as one of their dominant patterns there. And then moving on to our last pattern that is in the next slide, the compliance, right? The compliance is that student that is very, sometimes they are really reserved. Yeah, they are really quiet. They do not really participate and engage much, right? Just like the other student I forgot to say about stability, Stability is not really the student that's going there. They will go and participate and do a role play in front of everyone if you do give them support and you do provide a safe environment where no one is going to be making fun of everyone and etc. Right? Compliance, not even if you do provide, they prefer to be just like, no, just let me be here. I will be doing my stuff. You teach there, and that's it. Okay, don't call me there. Yeah, that's the kind of thing. They are very self-disciplined. They are those students that you give the lesson. So, oh, you have to do this, this, and that. They do it. They will try to do it with perfection. They will do their best in the activities, right? And they will even ask you for more. So these are the kind of students who can also be challenged. You can also use extra activities with them. So they are also likely to finish before the others. However, should they help the others? They do not really enjoy being sitting with other students who have more difficulty, just like, okay, I have to help you. But they will, but it's not really their favorite thing, right? Sorry. So they also have very quick rational thinking. So for logical stuff, they are really quick. They get it just like boom, like that, right? And they have a great sense of justice. So these are the students that are usually going to come and tell you, teacher, fulaninho was cheating on the test, da, da, da. And sometimes that may be a problem because the patterns that he or she has about what is right, what is wrong, may be a little bit too rigid. And sometimes when the kids, especially I'm thinking about kids now, when they don't do things that are so right according to his or her perspective, that makes relationships with the other kids even more difficult because he's going to be the one rallying the others out. So the other kids may not really, oh, he's not a nice kid, he behaves like an adult, or things like that, right? So these are the kids, or these are the teenagers that really need our help because they do not like mingling with the others, right? They sometimes even be seen as arrogant. They sometimes may even be seen just like how they think they are superior and up nose and that kind of thing. So, and sometimes they will say, no, I don't want to mingle with the others. No, can I do just like, it's group work. Can I do it by myself, teacher? So these are the kids that you really need to talk to them. Why is it important for you to do a group work? And this student, differently from the dominance, you need to go into the details, all the nitty-gritty, everything, every detail that you can use to support your idea, your argument, you are going to use with this student. The same thing when you are criticizing their work. You also need to use every little detail, all the ideas that you have there. This is wrong because of this, and that. This is right because this, and that. So the kind of feedback that you just say, very good, good work, doesn't work with the kind of student, okay? This is the student that you should use the most specific kind of feedback. Your pronunciation of this word was perfect because you could do the linking sound. That student is really going to appreciate that because that student is going to see, wow, this teacher really knows their stuff. I can trust them. I can depend on them, right? So if I need any help, I can maybe show that I cannot do everything by myself. Another thing that this student needs help with is exactly perfectionism. As they are perfectionists, they tend not to be comfortable showing their work to others, even you, right? So they say, no, it's not good enough. There is always something that's not ready. So they tend to procrastinate sometimes because of that. And it's not even because, oh, this student doesn't want to do his work or her work. No, it's because they want to achieve this perfection. But depending on what they are going through, they are not going to be able to show this perfection to you. They are not going to be able to reach the standards that they have imposed on themselves, right? So this is the thing. These are the kind of students that also prefer to keep things the way they are. So if you need to change, and I'm talking about especially private students that sometimes we're dealing with, oh my gosh, and I need to change some of the times, really, tell this student if you need to move them from Monday to Wednesday, yeah, tell them in advance. So fulano or fulana, I was thinking if it would be possible within a month to change your schedule, if we could have classes instead of Mondays on Wednesdays and so on. They will appreciate if you give all the details, because now I'm going through this and that. Okay, they will really appreciate that, and they will understand it better, right? That makes it better for them, and your relation with them too will be better, right? Well, is it always that one person has, oh, one person is dominant, period? One person has compliance only, period? No. These behavioral patterns, they tend to be matching with one another, right? So in the next slide, we have the possible combinations. They usually come in pairs. Can there be just one behavior pattern? Yes, sometimes one behavior pattern is going to be the dominant one, but most of the times you're going to have the DIID, so dominant influence, influence dominance, or stability and compliance, compliance stability are going to be the most common ones, the most common combinations. The other ones are also possible, okay? Sometimes you may even see a student that one day they really want to participate and engage in class. They are there raising their hands. The other day they are just like, teacher, leave me alone. Just give me the stuff. They're really just behaving analytically, just quiet there, analyzing the things. Then you say, oh my gosh, what is the matter with that student? They may have patterns that are just like on the two extremes, right? So they may have, for example, influence and compliance, right? So they are in extremes, they are opposites. So that's why, and then you say, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. What did I do last class? No, it's the behavioral pattern that that student has. So that's something that you could also observe in your students and see how you can better help and respect that. Sometimes they're going to be more like one behavioral pattern, sometimes like others. Remember, just like I said in the beginning, and just like the ancient people observed in the very beginning of times, right? That we are influenced by the exterior, right? So what is happening there in the environment we are inserted will influence our actions, yeah? Of course, we also bring these things from within. Is it possible, for example, for a student or for a person to change their behavioral pattern? Yes, it is a possibility. Is it just like, boom, happens like that? No. But sometimes when the environment changes, they may change, okay? So a person may start having more dominance qualities, more dominance characteristics if they are moved into a position of leadership, for example, and that kind of job that they do demands that from them. So they may start changing and adapting a little bit. Yeah, but there will always be some of our characteristics, just like Jung observed, that will be there. They will not be easily changed. Okay, so in the next one, I guess I have just the show you the Brazilian population behavioral patterns, right? Because you see, this is something that I got from Solids. They are a company that applies that kind of test, the DISC test, right? And then we have more or less what the Brazilian population is. The Brazilian population, I'm considering the people who took the test with them. And this is from 2018, right? The influence. So we are really a communicative people, right? So we talk, we are more friendly, we tend to be more relaxed, and we can see that in Brazilians, right? The second one would be dominance, right? So we still have this trait. So you can look at your students. They may be a little bit of a mix of that, right? In these patterns. Here, later on, we are going to talk about, I have here for you, then I'm going to check with Marcela how we are going to share it with you guys. We have the simple version of the DISC test. So then you can do it yourself, and we can also apply it to your students. So for example, if you have especially upper intermediate students and you're working on a lesson related to sorry, related to personality, behaviors, and so on and so forth, that could be used. Oh, that's the one, right? So then we have this test there. So in this test, the idea is for each line, you are going to choose the one that speaks louder to you. Do not think too much. Do not go, oh, I don't know, maybe. No, which the first one that you go there? Go there and circle. And then in the second page, you will see that you can have more of dominance, more of influence. Sometimes you're going to have two of them combined, right? And then you see, oh, really? Am I really like that? And so on. Because probably, as I was speaking about your students, you have also pictured yourself and you have seen yourself in some of the behaviors that I have talked about here, right? Thank you very much, Marcela. So, guys, I believe this is mostly of the things that I have to share here with you. Yes. And going back there, I have, I guess, in the next slide already the bibliography. Yes, the bibliography that I have used with some of the books and some of the links. So if you're interested, you can go and dig deeper into that, right? Have a look at that. And if you'd like any other information, if you'd like to get in touch, I would be really glad to be in touch with you. And in the next slide, you have my contact, my social media, and my email. Yes, and I would like to thank you very much for being here with us this morning. And it's been a pleasure to be speaking on behalf of BRAZ-TESOL, on behalf of the Coaching for ELT. Yes, thank you very, very much, guys. And I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, your experience. This is a very interesting topic. And we know that this could be very useful in the classroom. Sometimes we think, we try to guess what's going on with our students, but it is much easier if we have some sort of resource that we can use to go deeper and to be able to prepare ourselves for the challenge that we face, that are so many. So the more information we have, the better we can prepare. Thank you very, very much for being here, for offering your time and your skills and your knowledge to share with us. We have here 21 people watching. We had 24 people some time ago, but some people had to teach. Yeah. And what we have, we don't have any questions, but we do have a comment from Carlos. And he said that the key issue for him is how to motivate the students so as they like to learn at the classroom and also just by themselves 7 days along the week. So that is our biggest challenge, I believe. Do you have any comments on that, Maira? How we can help students be more engaged?
I believe that by having in mind these behavioral patterns, so what kind of things do this person like to do? Are they the kind of student who likes to be challenged? And then I'm going to be adopting a challenging attitude towards them, you know? Just like, okay, so can you do this one? Really? Are you sure you can do that? So why don't you bring us some songs for the next class? I used to ask my students to bring some different things to class, you know, maybe leaving this open to them to bring some stuff. So the class is not only me, just like here, but it's also you. These kind of students, the influence and the dominance, they are really going to enjoy and they are going to bring some more stuff. The other ones who tend to be a little bit, you know, in their zone, the compliance one or the stability one, you will need to be just like really approaching them. And the stability one, tell them, wow, you've been doing such a great job and such a great thing here. I really like it. So this is the student that's going to be, you know, wow, the teacher liked it. So I'm doing well. I'll try and do more of it. Yeah. The compliance one, you can go and check just like, wow, did you know that? So bring interesting facts, extra things that will make them delve into the topic, really go deeper into it. So they are going to enjoy it. So it's not only what everybody else knows, but I know more than they do. So this kind of things, I guess, could help him with their students, with his students there.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the comments. Yeah, I think also instead of relying really on motivation, we can try to help our students create a sustainable study practice. Because when they have this routine, a study routine, where they go and study for at least 30 minutes every day, they perceive improvement. They come to the classroom and they see how they are learning and how things are much easier for them. So this also helps with the motivation to keep doing it. I'm a firm believer that self-discipline fosters motivation. It's like a cycle. The more self-discipline you have, the more motivation you have, and then the more motivation you have to have self-discipline. So they kind of complete each other, and it works for other things as well, not only learning the language, but this could also be something that we can help them with.
Exactly. Totally
That's
agreed.
perfect. We are going to make it available, yeah, the disc for the teachers, right?
Yes.
The test, and also the answers, so that they can analyze themselves and maybe apply this to their students. So we can leave these. We are going to edit the video to be available later on the YouTube channel, and we can leave this link to a download there. Okay?
Perfect.
That's perfect. All right. So thank you very much, everyone who's there watching us. Don't go away, because we have more. We have much more coming up. Now we have, let me stop sharing here just for a moment. And we're going to have Tania de Chiaro sharing her presentation with us in 4 minutes. She's already there, just waiting in the backstage. Before we have her, let me share with you our sponsors. Yeah, because we have some great sponsors helping this event become true. So let me share with you here. Just a minute. I want to show you everyone who's making this event possible. And there they are. Thank you very much, partners, sponsors, and also all the speakers. And as you know, it's a whole month of events, and we still have a lot to come. So here you have all the SIGs that will be presenting during the month of October. I will be back on October 31st with the BSIG, the Business English SIG, which I'm also a member. And I also support, because I am a big fan of business English, and I use a lot of coaching techniques with my business English students. So I invite you all to be there together with us also on the 31st of October. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing a little bit just to get things arranged with Tania, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. Don't go away, okay? Just a second.
Marcela? Disabled. Hi. This is disabled. It says disabled.
It says disabled, yeah.
We should try, because I think you put it in the schedule for 9:10, not 9 o'clock.
Oh yeah, because that's true.
So there is some kind of interval. So maybe we should try to fix this. Can we?
Let's do it. Yes. I'm going to mute and stop the video and we can talk on the chat, okay?
Great.
Hello again. All right, so it's time to start the second talk of the day with Tania de Chiaro, who's going to talk to us about goals. And this is a very, very important topic when it comes to coaching, because everything starts from the goal. If we don't know where we're going, any path will take us there, and that's not what we want for our students. So welcome, Tania. Thank you very much for being here, for offering your time, your expertise, and share what you know with us. It's a pleasure to have you here. You can start telling us a little bit about yourself and about your experience with students.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to thank Marcela for the invitation. It's really nice to be able to meet and share ideas and things that we've been trying to do in class. Some of them we accomplish good results, and then we have to try harder to get more results. Well, I have a language institute. I've had it for over 30 years. And we specialize in training hotel and restaurant employees to speak to the guests and the customers. And I also teach privately. So I've been using some of the tools that we are talking about today for some time with adult students. I studied languages at USP, and I also took my master's degree there in education. So it's a very dear topic to me, the fact that it's important for us to try to do our best to make students learn how to learn. This is one of the one of my most wanted goals, something that I really try to do every day with my students, okay? And before, so let's move to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so yeah, I think we can go to the next. We started already, okay. So before we start talking about goals, I want to suggest that you grab a piece of paper and you write the answer to this question so that we can use it later, okay? So by the end of this year, what is something you want to have accomplished in your career? Write it down. We don't have many people here in Zoom, right, Marcela? But we might have some people on YouTube. I'm not following YouTube, so I don't know.
Yeah, we have 25 people on YouTube. So yeah, just grab a piece of paper and do as she says.
Okay, please, right. And we're going to use this a little later, okay? We may move to the next slide, please. So going back to the beginning of, I decided to have this title for my presentation because, you know, this is a sentence from Alice in Wonderland, and it really has a lot to do with goals, right? Because if you decide to do something and you don't know what your aim is, it's really very difficult for you to get there if you don't know where you want to go, right? So bear this in mind while we talk about everything we're going to talk about today. Okay, what does knowing the path or knowing where you want to go relates, or how does this relate to a goal? Okay, let's start. So the next slide says, in the next slide, I just want to design or tell you a little bit about what I plan to do with you today. Okay, in this next 40 minutes, I hope. So first we want to talk about the SMART goals, what they mean and how they can be used to help us. After that, I want to show you some study and research in educational psychology, because that helps us back up what we are talking about in terms of goal setting, okay? And finally, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ideas that I use with my students in goal setting, okay? And then we'll have time for comments and questions if you have any. And I would like to hear your take on that too, okay? So let's go. Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with this Empretec. It's a course that we take. It's a course that here in Brazil, it's sponsored by SEBRAE, okay? It's a course that is really, it was designed by this flagship of United Nations. It's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And they have a capacity they have a workshop really. It's a workshop for entrepreneurs, okay? And in this workshop, it's a 60-hour workshop. They teach you how to build and practice your entrepreneur attitudes, behaviors, mindset, okay? And I took this workshop in 2003, and I want to tell you a story about it. Although we should not comment on the workshop because it spoils the fun for the ones who will take after us. But I will tell you one story about it. At a certain moment of the course, of the 60-hour course, they brought to us a toy like this one. Each of us had a toy, and they showed it to us, and we had to practice a little bit, and they showed it to us, and they told us that we had a task. And then they separated us into smaller rooms with smaller groups, and they told us that we had 10 minutes to get better at it, right? And after 10 minutes, we got back to the auditorium, and we had to share our experience with the tutors. And they asked us questions like what we did and how we did it, how many did we get right, and things like that. And part of the group, there was a group of us, myself included, who used the entire time. We had 10 minutes. We used the entire time to practice, to train, without having any worry about the result or how much we could get right, just in the hopes that the result would come. Okay, the tutors called our attention when they gave us feedback. They called our attention to our behavior and to our approach to the task, because we had not set goals to ourselves. And that was the first time I painfully heard about goal setting, okay? And in that course in 2003, I learned about the SMART goals, okay? So let's, Marcela, let's look at the SMART goals. Maybe some of you are already familiar, some of you already use it. SMART goals is an acronym. It was designed by the management area. They tried to help team leaders and managers to reach more specific goals with their teams. And they designed this acronym, which is, let's go to the next slide, which means specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, okay? If you look for this in the internet, you will see that some people use different words for the acronyms. I like this, this way of naming it. And I will explain a little bit about each aspect, okay? The specific, or the, no, go back, please. Yeah, okay, thank you. The fact that your goal has to be specific, there is a very typical example they give about losing weight, for example. If you say, I want to lose weight, or if you say, I want to lose 2 kilos, there is a great difference. Losing weight is very broad and maybe unreachable, and losing 2 kilos is something possible, okay? So when you put a specificity to your goal, it's much easier for you to measure, right? And also, when you talk about attainable, what is it? It's possible to have a list of tasks that break your goal into actionable, doable tasks, right? So the attainable relates to that. How am I going to reach this goal? Okay. And then, of course, it has to be relevant. And relevant means that it has to do with your story of life, your aims, what you want to reach in your life. What value does that have to you in the context of your own life? Okay, or in the context of your learning, for example, a language. Okay, so how relevant is that for you? And time bound, because we're not going to do this forever and we're not going to wait for the results to come. We have to have certain aims to certain time frames. Okay. And in the next slide, we're going to see that there is one more thing that is important to point out in terms of goals. You can think of goals in 3 areas or 3 aspects of the whole process, okay? One kind of goal is the process goal. So this is very much what sports or athletes aim at. They have 3 kinds of goals. First, they start with the process. So if you were learning something new, if you're learning a new skill, you have to know how to do it, what to do in order to make that skill happen. If you go back to that challenge I had in the entrepreneur course, we had to learn how to swing the thing and how to put the ball into the spike. And that was the process. We first had to learn how to do it in order to start mastering the task itself, right? And after that, you can focus on a performance goal. If you think of a performance goal, it would be like, okay, so I'm going to try to track my improvement on getting it right. So I'm trying to do this. I know the movements now, and I will count how many I get right. And then finally, you have the outcome. In the outcome goal, you're going to think about how many you want to get right in a row, for example. So I'm aiming at getting like 20 times the right exercise, the right movement, the right skill, right? In a language learning context, we could say that if you were learning a new challenge, any new challenge that you are learning, you need to acquire the process first. So you could think of a language learning skill or the process could be simple as the language structure, like for a beginner student, basic subject verb complement, as it could be like a process of going shopping in English, or maybe having an interview, or writing a text, or maybe an email. The process of how to do it, this could be a goal, right? Once they master the process, then they could go for a performance goal to get better at the format or the way that they are doing that task, right? And then finally, they could look for an outcome goal, which would be, for example, to prepare for a test or to go shopping and buy everything that they need without hesitating. So the outcome would be the result of the whole process that was monitored for him to get to that task or skill. Okay. Do we have any questions or anything that is coming up?
Not so far, no.
Okay, okay. So we could, yeah, we can go to the next slide then. In fact, the whole idea of goal setting and monitoring your progress has also been explored by educational psychology studies and research. And I want to talk to you a little bit about self-regulated learning, okay? So have you heard, maybe you could write in the chat or on the YouTube channel's comments, have you heard of self-regulated learning and how it relates to goal setting?
No interactions here.
Okay, so let's go on. Yeah, let's go on. Okay, so the next slide shows you some of what the scholars call the self-regulatory processes, okay? Each of these processes help us improve our achievement when we are learning, be it information, be it a skill, okay? So I'm going to read them because I think they are interesting for us to think about. Goal setting is a process. Planning is another process. Self-motivation, attention control, so hard in times of pandemic. Learning strategies, self-monitoring, and self-evaluation. So it doesn't matter if you're looking to improve your achievement on a task, a project, for academic purposes, for professional purposes. These self-regulatory processes can help you improve your achievement. And for that, you need awareness and practice, okay? Let's go to the next slide and I will read the definition of self-regulated learning in a literature review paper by these guys here from Virginia Commonwealth University in the US, okay? So it says, it's kind of small for me.
Do you want me to read?
Okay, can you please? So I have some interaction.
All right. So it says, self-regulated learning is a process that assists students in managing their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions in order to successfully navigate their learning experiences. This process occurs when a student's purposeful actions and processes are directed towards the acquisition of information or skills.
So I think this gives us a great idea, a very good idea. This is a literature review, so it gets information from many authors who have studied and researched about it. And it's really interesting to see that self-regulation is really a set of abilities, a set of processes that we learn along life, right? And most times, or sometimes, we don't, or let's say most of the times, we don't learn these processes by ourselves. Usually we have a teacher or a mentor or a tutor to help us through, because there are so many things that we should be observing. And in fact, research says that very seldom do teachers guide their students through self-regulation. So this is something for us to think about. Are we doing it? Or how are we doing it? Should we be doing it more, right? And this helps us as students ourselves, because we are studying all the time, and it helps us see how we should be guiding our students. Okay, so this is something interesting for us to think about, and I will go a little deeper in that. In the next slide, I show you the process divided into 3 phases. Most of the studies who talk about, most of the scholars who talk about self-regulated learning, they divide the process into 3 phases. And this model is by Zimmerman. This is an author I have been reading a lot, and he and his colleagues, he's a professor and researcher in educational psychology in New York. He's based in New York, and he and his colleagues designed this graph. And it's very interesting to see parallels to the SMART goals. Okay, and this, of course, this is so complex and so deep, we won't be able to cover it all. But because our topic is SMART goals or goal setting, I thought I could show you this to see how much how linked it is to study and research in educational psychology. Okay, so let's have a look at the forethought phase, which gives us the topic of goal setting and strategic planning. This is really setting a specific goal and making it attainable, or listing the tasks that you need to reach the goal, right? And then if we go to the next level, where the performance phase is, we're going to be measuring it by self-recording and self-experimenting. This is so rich, really. You were trying on a task, you have a goal, you're self-recording, you're tracking your performance, something I did not do when I was trying to learn the cup and the ball. So self-recording and self-experimenting are ways to measure your improvement. And one more way to measure your improvement would be the self-evaluation, all right? And the self-evaluation is something I do a lot with my students because they have to learn to track their performance, to analyze how they do, to evaluate the way they perform, okay? And then finally, we have the intrinsic value. I like that very much because everything we do has to have a meaning and a value to ourselves. And this is the intrinsic value that any task or any goal that we propose ourselves to go after and to chase, it has to be relevant for you. Like I said, for the context of your life, for the moment you are at. So relevance is really important, even in this process, or even more in this process of self-regulating. If something is not relevant, the student will not engage. And this is so, it's such a trendy word nowadays, isn't it? Engagement. And if it's not relevant, it's not going to be engaging, right? Okay, so this is a very interesting model. By the way, I'm going to show you all the references, and most of these articles are available at ResearchGate, so you can read them yourself, you can study more, okay? And then the next slide shows another quote by another scholar. His name is Shunk, and he says, planning and goal setting are two complementary processes which happen in 3 stages: setting a goal for a learning task, establishing strategies for achieving the goal, and determining how much time and resources will be needed to achieve the goal. So you find in educational psychology the same aspects that we find in management when we talk about SMART goals. All right, so it's not a coincidence. It's really something that works, okay? And it's very interesting to understand that there are research studies that prove that if you teach a student how to self-regulate, this student will be more engaged and more motivated and more self-confident. So this is really great for us in terms of evidence to make us use these things in class or with our students, okay? So we get to the part where I tell you some of the ways I use goal setting, okay? So in the next slide, okay. So I told you I learned about goal setting in 2003 in the Impretech course. And then in 2006, I had the pleasure and the privilege to go to TESOL International in New York. And there I attended a workshop on goal setting. It was a workshop given by the San Diego Community College, and they showed us how they proposed goal setting to adult learners. It was very, very good. It was a very good lecture. And I have the form here for you. I want to show in the next slide. This form is also available on the internet. You just Google this part here underneath, San Diego Community College, and you will see the way they do it. During the workshop in TESOL conference, they showed us how they prepare their students to this task. So before they show the form and they ask the students to fill in the form, they have a class about goal setting, and they make a metaphor or a parallel to an athlete, for example, a soccer player. So they ask adults to reflect on the idea that before the guy goes to a soccer game and makes and scores the goal, he has a lot of training behind that. He has a lot of practice. So in this practice, he finds difficulties, and because of the difficulties, he has to find solutions to overcome difficulties to make his goal, to score his goal. So it's really interesting that they tell a story and they get adults engaged, and adults start, these adults from that specific group, they tell us that they start getting engaged in the story, and they understand that goal setting is important, and the whole process to get to a goal is important as well. And then they show the form, and in the form, they have students state what the goal is, and then the problems that students face, right? So students will have to commit. This is the word, right? I think when you commit, you overcome problems because you visualize them, right? Or you visualize the problem and then you try to visualize ways to overcome it. So they put the goal and then the barrier they have, a problem that they feel they have. And they ask students to show or to state 3 ways to solve that problem. And then they have students choose one solution, number 1, number 2, or number 3. And then they ask students to try this solution for 2 months. So they put the name, they put the month here, like January and then February. And they have this scale here, the key is here, for them to measure their progress. So number 1, this is exactly their form. So this number 1 is, I didn't do it yet. Number 2, I tried, it was difficult. Number 3, I can do it. I need more practice. Number 4, I can do it. And number 5, I can do it well. So they try this solution for 2 months, and every month they grade themselves. And if in 2 months the progress was only 1 or 2, they are encouraged to try a different solution. So they go back here from the 3 solutions they have and they try a different one. And then they measure their progress again, okay? I took this form and I adapted it to my students. Because I was using it for basic students, I did it in Portuguese, okay? And after you do that, you can repeat this for the next bimester if you want, or you can adjust, but it's a really good way for students to start taking responsibility for their own development, their own improvement, their own goals, okay? I think this is a way for us to start teaching students that they must take charge of their own studies, okay? And as Marcela says, they can have a study program. It's on their hands, okay? In the next form, Marcela, please. This is another one that I made myself. And what I did here was that I decided to point out to students strategies or study ways to study or hints for them to look. Maybe you should take care of this and that. So I wrote some statements of which goals they could pursue. And I left the last one for them. If they didn't want any of those, they could choose another one, right? But I tried, my intention there was to try to guide my students to watch or maybe to observe and to be aware of things that they could do in order to study English, because sometimes we feel that students don't know how to study. So this was like a push, right? To make them realize that there were actual, very, how can I say, concrete actions they could take, okay? And then they had to commit to so many times a week, so many minutes a day, right? And then, of course, this was one bimester. I asked them to keep this form in a place where they could see it every day, because if they said they would study 3 times a week for 5 minutes a day, it doesn't matter, but they had to keep this promise, right? And they had to track their improvement and to monitor how they were doing. And then in the next bimester, we talked about what they had accomplished, right? So it's important to keep reminding students of this, the way that they should be monitoring themselves, and then to go back to the form and to go back to talking about it. Did it work? Didn't it? Didn't? Why it didn't? How can we do it? Can you think of something that can make more sense to you? Maybe do it in a different way. Set your alarm. I usually suggest my students set the alarm on cell phone to stop anything they are doing and study. Okay, so you have to try to help your student get the idea and get the persistence and the regularity that it takes, okay, to be consistent. And the next slide shows you, this is a booklet I created, and this is a bonus I give to my students who hire me for private classes. In this booklet, I show them, or I teach them, I explain the goals to them, what the SMART goals are, and then I put as a table, I give an example of what the specific is, and then they have a part where they fill it in. And then they fill it in by themselves, they think about it, they read what I had, what I have there for them to explain what it is. Sometimes there are lots of videos on the internet. You can ask them, depending on their level, you can ask them to watch a video and you can talk about it in class, explaining what the SMART goals is, right? You can talk about in class, or you can have them fill in a form like this, and then you can open some time for them to talk to you about it in class. And then you can see if they need more guidance, if they need more explanations. But that's, if you have private students, this is a good way for you to help them in this path, right? And now we go back to our beginning, yes? So we're reaching the end of the talk, and I hope this talk helped you remember that we cannot set off to go anywhere if we don't know where we're going. Okay, and now I invite you to go back to what you wrote for that question in that piece of paper. And I would like you to think about this. If you haven't done this yet, how could you work on this that you wrote to make this wish become a goal? All right. Do you think that you have the tools to do that now? Do you think that everything we talked about helped you create and set a SMART goal for yourself? Let's see if we have any interactions.
Yeah, we should wait a little bit till they get the question there on the group.
Okay.
But I would like to say that what you shared is really, really interesting. And by the way, I found the link to the
form, that San Diego form.
Yes, and there is a class, a suggestion of how you should prepare the class to apply the form.
Exactly.
So yeah, I shared this link with the participants in the YouTube chat, so people can download and know how to proceed with the plan of the class. That's
great, Marcela. Thank you very much, because I was looking through the papers I brought back from this conference, and I could not find the form. And then I simply looked in the on Google, I think, on the internet, and then I found it, and I said, "Oh, that's good, because then I can tell them." Because the whole process of the class is really, really interesting. How they use the metaphor of the athlete, and it's so good for students. And at the time, I was giving a lot of classes to the waiters and the chambermaids and the hotels. And that helped me a lot to show them how to set goals. Yeah, that was good.
Actually perfect, because sometimes we don't give the right attention to this. We just start, we want to teach, we want to share English, we want to talk about language, but planning and preparing will help students reach much better and concrete results. Yesterday, I was giving a workshop for teachers in Munich, and we were talking about goal setting and the coaching process in the classroom. And we got to the conclusion that this is also important for the teacher as a way to protect ourselves from creating and trying to sustain expectations that are not feasible. When you set the goal in a clear way like this, you make sure that students have the right expectations, what they can accomplish within a certain time frame. Because in the beginning, everyone is very motivated and everyone says they will do a lot outside the classroom, but in the end, we know they always find excuses not to do their part of the job. But when you work on the goal in a specific way, you make sure that they really see if what they think they can do is really possible or not. And this is great for both parts.
Yeah. And I think there are two things there. One is that we want our students to be more autonomous. And this is something that always bothered me, because you go into class and students put on you all the responsibility of their accomplishment. So this is important to make students aware that they are responsible for that. They have their part to do, all right, to carry on. And learning how to learn is something that always interested me. And I think we have, this is, it's very funny that you said we go into class and we want to think about English, but teaching students how to learn can be done in English, and it can be rich, very rich too. Mm-hmm. And just one more thing I forgot to mention, Oxford, the publisher, they have a YouTube channel, right? And they have a video on SMART goals for language teaching. This is really good too. So if you want to look for it and to show your students about and talk about it and discuss how to set goals, this is a video related to SMART goals. So what they to learning language learning goals. So it's a very clear example, and students could take that as an inspiration, you know, to write their own goals.
Okay? Just shared it on YouTube chats.
Great.
And also, I would like to recommend this book that I've been reading, The Strategy Factor in Successful Language Learning. And the author talks about how we can help students develop learning strategies, not communication strategies, not what to do when they don't know the word and they need to compensate lack of language, but what they can do to be more efficient learners and take more out of every study session that they have. This is great for adults because nobody has time to waste. And
exactly.
If you have only 20 minutes to study, you should take the best out of it. And
yeah,
good
if you please move to the next slide, it's the reference. And as I said, I took most of it from researchgate.net. And this is my Instagram and my Facebook page. I post some things for teachers and for students. I also have a YouTube channel where I post some videos for teachers and for students, right? And I think we can open now for questions or comments if anybody wants to say something about it, about the goals and how they are doing it in class. If you can move to the next slide, please. I want to thank everybody for the time. And thank you, Marcela and the SIG, for including me in this event today.
I thank you for being so willing to share your experience. It's great that you've been using this with your students. And it's so enriching, as Rosanna said here on the chat on YouTube, to see how we do things in different ways and how we try to do things to help students. And we are always changing and improving our practices. We never stop. And this is so amazing. And when we have this kind of opportunity to know what the other person is doing, and we can add to what we are already doing, my God, there are no limits for teachers. Yeah, we can accomplish so much, and our students will just benefit from all of it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. We have 30 people online now. Yay!
That's great. That's great.
30 committed teachers who are spending Saturday morning learning to help their students. And I would love to show this to our students, because I don't think they have a clue how much we worry about them and how much we devote our time and energy to help them improve, right?
Exactly. So yeah, we should take this. We should take a picture.
Yeah, definitely. Sure. And post on all social media.
Yeah, and say, look, we're here studying and exchanging ideas and trying to improve ourselves because we care, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That's good.
We do care. So we have here lots of thank yous and lots of Thank you for the inspiring talk, and they really loved the topic, and they really loved the forms and charts that you shared. So yeah, thank you very much.
I did not share my email, but you can find me on Instagram, and then direct message me, and then I can send you my email. If you want to chat, exchange ideas, I'm there.
Sure. Well,
okay.
Thank you very much, Tania. And
thank you.
Continue with us for the following talk. In 10 minutes, we're going to start. Not 10 minutes, right? We're going to start at 10:20. Oh, we still have 10 minutes here. We can.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more. Yes.
If you want to, let's see if teachers have something to.
Yeah, I'm here watching their comments, see if they have any questions. CN is asking for the name of the book. I will type here the name of the book in a few minutes. I have a question for you. What do you see as the biggest challenge when you work with a SMART goal? Setting the goal, in my point of view, is not the most challenging part. What do you see as the most challenging part, in your opinion?
If the student is a basic student, sometimes he doesn't even know how to set the goal because they don't know what they want. Sometimes they just come with the biggest goal, which is speak English, you know. But I would say that monitoring is challenging. Setting a goal, maybe you can help your student, because like I put in the form, you break it down to students, right? So what I do sometimes is I ask them, some of my students do not live in Brazil, they live in the United States, and they have a lot of tasks that they have to do in English, right? They have to, so I transform that into goals. And that is, and then it's much easier for them to see their progress, because if they, like I said, if they have to make a telephone call to set an appointment, once they train and then they are able to do it, then they feel that they have reached that goal. But I think measuring could be something challenging, because sometimes it's their progress is very abstract to them, and measuring would be probably one of the challenges. I don't know if it's the biggest, because it depends on the students, and like Maira said, we have different personalities. Sometimes it's different. It's difficult for a student to set a goal and for the other one to keep track of it. But I would say that monitoring is difficult for them because of the self-evaluation that I was talking about. This is something else that I really devote time to doing, self-evaluation, because it's very difficult for them to observe themselves and to evaluate their performance without emotional parameters. And they get confused, and it's very difficult for students to objectively observe their performance. Okay, so you have to help them throughout, I would say.
Yeah, I also find challenging to, sometimes you have students who have goals and they try to dedicate time to studying outside the classroom, but at the same time they want it so much, they don't do it. And it's very frustrating for us as teachers to keep trying and trying and trying with these kind of students, because they find all kinds of excuses not to do what they have to do. And do you feel this kind of, do you have this kind of situation? Is it common to you?
Yeah. I have some cases, students who can, some of my students can only study once a week. I mean, meet with me once a week because of all the commitments they have. And then I tried to set a goal with them that they would have, because I wanted them to have contact with the language more times a week. We tried to set a goal for them to have 3 pieces of homework or tasks. Could be a video, could be some reading or something to fill in 3 different moments of the week before they saw me again. And I tried this recently, and the person unfortunately could make it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then she was all over with tasks and family and the work, her work, and it was very difficult for her to open time to do the homeworks, and she was getting frustrated because she didn't, because she's a really good and committed student. And this is it's a very fine line between, you know, because in class she's committed, she's very motivated, she's engaged, but she's not managing to find time to study. So that has been a challenge for her. And I don't blame them, because I think we have the same problem. When we become students, we have some problems too. You know yourself, you're studying German and you know how hard it is. I saw your calendar waking up at 5 a.m. to be able to do things, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really, and because of the personalities that Maira was talking about, I don't know much about the disc, but I've seen it and I relate it to what Maira said. It's very difficult for you to know what to do with the student if you push, if you talk about, because you might make your student even more frustrated. You have to be very careful. And then because of the pandemic, here in Brazil, we have this great problem that is even worse than in Europe. So we have to go slowly, I think. This is the way I do it. I try not to put students under pressure, although I sometimes feel they could do more, because it's really hard to know how they will react. So what I do is I propose every week a new task, and then I wait.
Yeah, it's a never-ending job. Yes.
This is something else that we have to mention, right? If you start setting goals, or if you start learning how to self-regulate, this is a never-ending process. And you will eventually get better at it, because it's a cycle, right? Remember the 3 phases. It's a cycle. And then when you come back to the beginning, you are a little bit better. We're always hoping that, right? We hope that you're a little bit better, and then you are improving a little more. And then you learn with the movement, with the process. Okay.
Definitely. We are always learning. That's the
yeah, that's it.
Teachers as well.
Yes, ourselves included. And because we are aware of it, I think even more, right?
Yes, we know what we need to do. Yeah, but sometimes when we are in the student's position, it goes all back to being a student, you know.
Yeah, well,
that's normal. Yeah.
I think we have to be very aware of what our strengths and weaknesses are. And we have to work on the weaknesses to get a little bit better every day.
Metacognition.
Yeah.
That's what we need to develop.
Okay.
Thank you so much, I cannot describe how happy I am to have you all here today, making this event possible. It was very, very nice of you to offer to be here and to share your experiences. And I hope we continue in touch because there's so much we can learn from each other. And I'm really interested in learning more about your practice and how you do things. So, and then we can share more with the community.
That's great. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's the first time we talk, really.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, we were always on social media, but never face to face like this. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I hope we go on spreading knowledge around.
Yeah, definitely.
And learning
we will.
from it. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So we'll have a 10-minute break and we'll come back at 10:20 with Gabriella Kovács talking about winning the race and coaching, how a coaching mindset can support students. This will be a great talk as well. So don't go anywhere. Just go grab some coffee and come back because there's more. Okay? I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Gabriella, to Coaching in ELT-SIG. We are ready to start the last presentation of the day. We've had so much already, so many good ideas coming from teachers working with different kinds of students and different ages. And now we're going to close with another great presentation and lots of good ideas from Gabriella. Gabriella, can you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Very briefly, my name is Gabriella Kovács and I live in Hungary. I'm originally from Australia, where I was born, and I've been doing teaching related things. I think that that's the best term I could use for many years now. And I received my BEd MA in Budapest in Hungary, and I got interested in coaching a couple of years ago, and it had such a huge impact on me that I've devoted the last few years of my professional life to language coaching, in which I specialize. And it was almost exactly 1 year ago that Carrie McKinnon and myself launched the International Language Coaching Association, which we are terribly proud of, and we just celebrated our first anniversary, so that's a huge big thing. So yeah, so that's a great thing. And basically my own personal and professional mission is to support language teachers to understand more about how coaching, a coaching mindset, and the methodology of coaching, its framework, can support them in their classes. So how they can grow with their students and the successes that they have, so that they can build bridges. Okay, sometimes we feel that we're here as teachers and the students are there, and there's this gap between us, and I think coaching can bridge that very nicely. And today I'm going to be talking about coaching through a very strong metaphor all along, which is, you know, racing and cars. And so it's going to be very exciting. It's the first time I'm doing this specific talk, so that will be also interesting for me to see how it works out. So I'm looking forward to getting everyone's feedback on how they're following, whether they like it, you know, any questions that you have. So yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing your ideas. And I'm sure it's going to be great. So let's get started.
All right. Okay. Let's get going. Okay. Let's move on then. So the title is Win That Race, and we're going to move on. Yes, I'll be talking about learner autonomy and how that can be influenced and how language coaching can support that. So if we can go on to the next slide. So what I'd like you to imagine, you're standing next to a car, a fantastic car, and you hand the keys over to somebody and you tell them to drive. So here you are, and here are the keys, wonderful. And you say how it's different, what kind of engine it has, all the technical details, what a fantastic color it might have, you know, how fast it can accelerate, and you know, just all these wonderful things about the car. And of course, what I'd like to imply with this whole thing is how this could be relating to teaching. So you could be the teacher and the person you're giving the car keys to is the student. Okay, so I'd like you to bear that in mind. And I'd like to, before we move on to the next slide, so at this point, I'd like you to ask yourself, is there anything missing here? So you give someone a brand new car, wonderful. You tell them how great it is, how fantastic it is. And okay, let's move on to the next slide. Probably you've got a few ideas going on in your mind now. And what we have here is that you might notice that you don't really know too much about the other person at this point, right? So we haven't asked whether they've got a license, where they would actually like to go. And just like in coaching, instead of you just give somebody the keys and say, go, and you can do whatever you want. That's not really the point of coaching, and obviously not of teaching either. You can ask it, you can start a process of going on a journey, so to say, together in a completely different way. So you can start out by asking a few questions to get to know each other, to find out about the goals. So connecting to Tania's presentation that she had last time. Where do you plan to go? Do you feel safe in this new car? Is anybody accompanying you? Can you afford to buy petrol? So very practical details. Where do you have a stopover planned if it's a longer trip? And also, how can I help you get started? So is there anything that is important from the point of view of the person taking that trip? So what happens in coaching very often is that you try to identify very much with the learner, with the client, and try to think what is really important for them. So you're taking much more the learner's point of view, and you want to help them to set off on their learning journey with as much support as possible. And I think that's basically what I'm going to be talking about today. So how we can achieve this. Let's move on, okay, to the next slide. And another thing which can be really important is to find out where the focus is. Of course, we talk about goals, we talk about personality, we talk about a lot of aspects of the learning journey. One thing that learners have a tendency to do is, right, so if we're staying with this car driving analogy, are they looking constantly at the rear view mirror, or are they looking straight ahead towards their goals? Now, if you're looking at your destination, the goals that you have, you're not looking at where you have been, right? Because if you're looking at where you have been and what you have or have not achieved, then basically you're focusing in the wrong direction. And very often those are the excuses that students come up with, right? That they can't do it because they haven't done it in the past, and they got really negative feedback about something in the past. And for me, that always suggests that they're looking in the wrong direction. They're looking in the rearview mirror, when in fact they should be looking at their goals, setting those up, whether they're SMART goals or other goals. Obviously, that's up to the coach and the client to come to an agreement on. But it's really important where you're focusing yourself, because there's this saying in coaching that where you have your focus, that's where all the energy is going to go. And if you're focusing on the past, then that's where you're going to stay. You're not going to be able to move forward. At least it's going to take much more effort if you're constantly, in a way, pulling yourself back. So the implications are that it's good to have that rear view mirror, but basically, like when you're driving, you're looking forward, and that's going to be the main focus of your attention, okay? So I'd like that to sink in a little bit, and it's very good to help your learners understand that this can be something which is really inhibiting, blocking them from moving forward, because they're constantly looking at what is really pulling them back in a way. Okay, so let's move on, okay, to the next slide, and let's have a look at what we have here. And I'm going to ask you to engage either in the chat here or in the YouTube channel if possible. So I'd like you to think about why driving for the first time, for example, is such a big step. Once again, we can identify with this. It's the first time maybe that our learner has joined our group, or it's the first time that they're learning a language, or it's the first time for something, okay? So let's have a look at it from the point of view of driving. Why is driving, or how is driving for the first time such a big thing? And I'd like you to just come up with your ideas, and I don't know whether Marcelo will be able to voice these comments if there are any, okay?
Yeah, they can share their ideas on the YouTube chat, and I can.
Great. Okay, so if there's anything that you would like to say at this point about this, then please share. So just wait a bit. So hopefully there will be 1 or 2 comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's wait a little bit. But what I could say is that there's a lot of anticipation for this moment. And I think we know how challenging it will be, and the size of the responsibility it is driving a car, and how dangerous it can be. So there is a lot of anxiety around it.
All right, yeah, and the picture also shows that a little bit, that there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress going on here, maybe even some frustration. So there can be some negativity. Also, the anticipation can be a very positive thing, right? So it's definitely something that we want our learners, for example, to have. Okay, so something really positive with a tinge of negativity. Okay, so driving for the first time.
We
now
have some ideas here, Gabriella.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, let's share. Yes, please.
Tania says that there are too many things to do and pay attention to at once.
Okay.
Sergio says the idea of taking control of something powerful, along with the feeling of promising autonomy. Wow, that's a very good one.
Ooh, okay.
And Ricardo says you're controlling a moving machine, so that must be a big challenge.
Okay. I liked in these comments that, yeah, there's this feeling of taking control is such a big thing, isn't it? And I think in teaching, it's something that we might not always discuss in the classroom. Obviously, teachers and trainers who have a coaching mindset will, but very often teachers tend to instruct a little bit more and try controlling the whole process a little bit more than me as a coach would find convenient for the client, so that they can find out a lot of things for themselves. Okay, thank you very much for these. Now, moving on, we're going to have a look at how this is related to language coaching. Okay, so why this is interesting. So the next slide is, so basically it's the definition of language coaching. Now read it out just so that it sinks in a little bit and it's very clear what I mean by language coaching. Okay, so it's a learner-led process aimed at creating optimal target language acquisition while working towards effective international communication skills in order to reach future-related goals. So it's a very compact definition of what we believe language coaching is at ILCA. And I highlighted 5 characteristics of coaching, which are the basis of how coaching can work in the classroom. Okay, so one thing is that it's partnership based. Same when you're driving with an instructor. It's true that you're the one doing the driving, but it is partnership based in that the instructor is there to help you and to support you. Okay, you're going to be using strategies that utilize intrinsic motivation. So if you didn't want to learn to drive, you wouldn't be sitting there in the first place. So that's quite a lot of, it means that there's quite a lot of motivation, internal motivation to get started. What is also important is that you're going to be refining learning skills. Okay, now what does that mean? As you go along, your learning skills will get better and better, because there's going to be a lot of awareness, a lot of conversation, a lot of metacognitive moments with the client, with the driver, about how they can get better and better at the skills and the competencies that they need. I think one of the most critical points of any coaching is that you develop awareness, a deeper understanding of what is going on in the process. Whether it's driving or learning, it doesn't really matter. And the last point, which you highlighted in the comments that you had, is that this sharing of responsibility and taking ownership is such a large chunk of what needs to go on in coaching in the classroom. Because if the client is not aware, does not understand that the learning is their responsibility. I'll take responsibility of the teaching and the coaching, but they're going to have to put their 5 cents in with the learning that they do. Then it's always going to be a teacher instructed, very much controlled process from the point of view of the teacher, which is not necessarily helping them to move forward. Okay, so these are 5 things that I think are pretty important and make coaching such a very valuable asset to any classroom. It doesn't even have to be language, but that's my speciality. That's why I'm talking about it here to you. So coaching is definitely going to be helping learners to take more responsibility and take control of their learning process. Okay, so that's the kind of summary of what I wanted to say here. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now what I'm going to explore in a little bit more detail here is the relationship between teacher, trainer, and coach, particularly teacher and coach. Okay, but if we had a bit more time, I'd have a separate slide or a separate explanation for what the differences between the 3 are, but primarily I'm going to be focusing on what the difference is between teacher and language coach. Okay, and we can move immediately to the next slide, so I'm totally okay with that, and we'll have a look at these. Okay, now the most important thing, we're going to start with number 1, is what kind of goals you have in teaching and what kind of goals you have in coaching. Okay, and I'm going to go around this donut chart, and I'll focus on the first one now, and then we'll move around it, if that's okay. So if we're focusing on goals in teaching, the primary goal is for the for the student, the learner, to move from one language level to another, to gain more vocabulary, to have better grammar, for their pronunciation to be better. So these are skills, competencies. These are areas which are very easily measurable. Okay, and we want them to know more, and that's a very cognitive area. Okay, now in coaching, our goal is not necessarily to be able to measure specific development in acquiring the language. Our goal in coaching, in language coaching, is for the client to be more aware and to be able to learn better. So we're helping them to understand what they need. And the speakers before me were focusing on things like DISC, so the behavior patterns, how to set goals. These are all parts of driving the awareness for the client to understand how they can learn better. So that's the primary goal of language coaching. In teaching, as I mentioned, it's important to move from level to level. In coaching, we do not focus on levels. We focus on whether the client has become more aware, has more control of what they want to do when they start learning. And because of this, the success of a coaching process is not going to be that they can now perform at 75% instead of 44% on a given test, for example, or whether they can now, I don't know, perform better at an exam or write a better composition or essay, etc. So it's not those kind of outcomes that we want to be focusing on, but much more on whether the client is more successful in how and why they want to reach their goals. Okay, so we're going to be measuring success in a different way in coaching. In teaching, I'm talking about very traditional kind of teaching where, you know, you open the book, you move from one page to the other. Strategy strategy is not necessarily a word that comes up very often, especially not learning strategy. So I was very happy that Marcella showed that book on learning strategies. It's such an important thing, and learners are very often not aware of their own learning strategies. So that's also something which coaching would want learners to identify. And of course, in teaching, very often there's a lot of assessment and testing. In coaching, we don't necessarily need to assess what level the client is at. We want them to understand how they can move forward to be better. So it's got nothing to do with testing or assessment at all. Okay. Moving on to the second point here, which is content. In teaching, we have very strong ideas about what kind of content we bring into the class. And if things are not working out as we would like to, if the learners, students feel that they're not making progress, what usually happens is the teacher starts thinking, well, okay, well then, what if we try this? What if we do that? And there's this influx of input, and suddenly there's going to be so many things going on, and that can cause even additional frustration for the client, for the learner. In coaching, we're going to be focusing much more on what the client wants. So we kind of pull back and say, okay, we see what's causing you difficulties, what challenges you have. Is there anything that you could imagine you'd love to do instead of what we've been or what you've been doing so far in the past? So we're pushing a bit of the responsibility, so to say, we're co-creating, we're creating together, collaborating in partnership on putting together the content. So it's a completely different way of building together, okay? In teaching, of course, we have very fixed outcomes, whether we're following a book or not, or we've got our own, processes, how we support our learners. We always know where we want to get to, what specific level, for example, our learner can reach through the teaching that we support them with, okay? In coaching, there's no fixed outcome because we have no idea, for example, what's going to happen in the coaching process if we're strictly speaking about coaching as such, and not a mixed approach where you're going to be bringing in input, you're using different teaching materials, and you're applying coaching to that. So that's a mixed model, that's a little bit different. But if you're merely coaching somebody, you're simply not going to have any idea of the outcome of the coaching process. And that's fantastic, because that means that the learner is leading the way. The key is always with the client, it's not with the coach. Something that we've touched upon, of course, in teaching, very often the responsible decisions, the syllabus creation is all in the hands of the teacher, excuse me. Whereas in coaching, we constantly strive to push that responsibility and the creation of what goes on in the processes towards the learner. Okay, so that's a very big distinction between teaching and coaching. And of course, something that rarely comes up in certain teaching situations is critical thinking, where we want the learners to be questioning materials, questioning processes, questioning the whole idea of what we are working on, for example, together. In coaching, that's, I'd say it's a prerequisite. It's something that we expect our learners to be doing, okay? Moving on to number 3. Rapport and contact. So the relationship that we have is going to be completely different in teaching and in coaching. So we're going to be looking at just one or two things because I'm aware of the time here. In teaching, there's always going to be a discrepancy. It's always going to be the teacher who's a bit higher up in the hierarchy, so to say, and the student is going to be, it's the classical situation where the teacher is telling the student what to do, and that kind of has an imprint on the whole relationship, okay? Whereas in coaching, we're always striving to be as much as possible to be in a partnership with the learner, which also means a very balanced kind of communication. Okay, so it's a very strongly bi-directional communication that we have. One thing I'd highlight here, it's very useful in a teaching setting also for the teacher to step back a little bit and not be as dominant as they might seem to if we think of it from the point of view of the student. And a very good way to do that is just think of the proportions that we have. Okay, so we've got 2 eyes, we've got 2 ears, and we've got 1 mouth, and we should be using them in that proportion, which means a kind of 4 to 1 ratio. Okay, so 80% of the time we should be listening and observing, and 20% of the time we should be speaking. So it could be a great experiment for you to, next week when you have your lessons, just try and look at yourself from the outside and think, okay, so am I really as dominant as my students might think I am? So who's doing more talking, them or me? Okay. Last point here, number 4, is language awareness. Okay, once again, 1 or 2 things. It's really important for us to be supporting the learning process. In teaching, we're focusing on the teaching, right? So we want the students to learn through our teaching. In coaching, it's going to be different. We're going to be leading them with a lot of questions, with a lot of self-awareness raising conversations that we have, and we want the learner to be leading through their own experiences and the ideas that come up in the coaching process. Okay, and it's really important that in coaching we do uncover the internal motivation for the learner to move forward, which is not to pass a language exam. That is not internal motivation. Or to get a good grade at the end of the semester. That is not internal motivation. Those are just things that somehow represent the progress that they're making, but it's not actually what drives them. What might drive them is that they're going to have a really great job, or they're going to be able to communicate with their friends in another country. So those are the things that we have to have conversations about. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me with this slide. I know this is quite complex, but we're going to move on a bit. I just wanted to tell you how I see the differences between coaching and training. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide here. Right, okay. Now, something I touched upon is working together, being in balance, having a partnership. And these are some of the ideas that I think suggest and lend themselves to how this can be carried out in the lessons that you have, okay? So creating learner-led and not learner-centered processes, there is a difference there. It means that you're relying more on the content, the ideas, the questions, the observations of your learners, instead of focusing on how you can make your lessons more learner-centered, because you're focusing on it and not your learners are in that conversation. It's not what I would call learner-led, okay? Another very important thing is to, as coaches, if you're a trained coach, you know exactly what I mean when I say that you hold the time and space for your clients. It's very important that when you ask a question, it can be a content question, it can be a question opening up options for your learners, it can be any type of question. But if you have a question that you ask your learner, whether it's a whole classroom full of learners or just one person, let them think about the answer. That's so critical. There have been studies made where it turns out that teachers on average wait less than 2 seconds for an answer. And if we're talking about a little bit about neuroscience, what is critical is that you give your learner that time, because that's when all the new connections are going on in the brain, okay? So that's really important that you let them think, let them come up with their own ideas, and the point is not whether it's correct or not. That's the teacher approach. It's much more about how they're going to start shifting into a growth mindset. So they're putting in the effort, they're actively involved and engaged in trying to answer the questions that you have. So give them the opportunity. Stay curious, positive, and direct. Okay, I think that kind of says all it can. Challenge the learner issues. So if you see that your learners are having some sort of difficulties or are in a challenging state of mind, so to say, then ask them about it. Don't just move on and don't instruct them, don't tell them what to do, but much rather ask them. Okay, so this is leading to the next one. Ask instead of trying to interpret or suggest or give advice. Simply ask the question. One of the takeaways from one of my workshops for one of the teachers was I learned that instead of saying something, if I ask, then I'm already much more of a coach than I have been previously. So that's really important, to ask much more. Okay, and be willing to say, I don't know the answer to this, I'm curious what you have to say here. Another thing coaching can help us to do is to structure our conversations much more. If we follow some kind of coaching model, or if we just apply a smart kind of thinking to the way that we put together the conversations that we have with our learners, that's already a step forward. Moving it a bit wider, you can do this with learners, but also if you're engaging with school staff. So it can be a great idea to see how your conversations can change the quality of your meetings with staff, also by applying these few things. Okay, so let's move on. And I'm also, if we can go to the next slide, okay. This is something that, sorry, I'm just checking here. Maira was talking about that it's really important to have in mind the individual approach for everyone. I mean, if we're just looking at learning styles or preferences or how you cater for different personalities, like with the DISC, it's important that you stay positive and you look at your activities from their point of view. So always having this kind of conversation in your mind, how is my activity that I want to bring to the class, how is that going to impact them? I mean, if you just look at these cars, all of these cars are going to be for different purposes. And it's the same with a lesson plan or an activity that you have. Is going to be different for everyone. So it's really good to keep in mind, but I think good teachers do that anyway. So that's definitely something that you need to keep in mind. Moving on to the next slide now. One or two points to keep in mind if you want to be working with a coaching mindset or you're using coaching tools to create a very safe environment. Now, this means that they feel trusted, they feel involved, and accepted. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of positivity and a lot of empathy going on in the classrooms where a coaching approach is very prevalent. You identify the goals, the values, the reasons to commit to the process, okay, with your learners. So this could be at the beginning of the year, but it can come up at any point. It's important to ask specific questions. So not only general questions like, are you okay with this? Or do you like this? But get into the details so that they have something to start thinking about, which is perhaps new to them in the learning process. Also focus on jointly agreed outcomes, which means that your learners are going to be looking at outcomes which the two of you, or obviously the class and you, have come up with together. And it can be something, whether it's the order of how you approach the material you want to work on, or specifically how you want to be working on those activities. It's always good to give a little bit of the decision making or the choices to the learners so that they feel that they can be involved. Something that's important also is to remain flexible throughout the process. So if you ask a question and you get an answer which you didn't expect, then to be able to have the flexibility to say, okay, that's a surprise for me, and then throw the ball back again and, okay, so how do you want to work on that? So being flexible is also a part of being a coach, because you never know what comes up. So if you start asking questions, you're going to get answers that maybe you didn't expect to have, okay? Last point here, it's great to have this plan, apply, observe, and adjust mentality. So you plan something in your class, you apply it, but also then don't forget to observe and see how it works, and then adjust. It could be a coaching tool, an activity that you do with a coaching mindset, and see whether it works out or what you need to reconsider next time you want to use it with a learner or a client. So that's definitely something. Now let's get into more specifics. I know I've been a bit theoretical so far, so we've still got a few minutes. I'd like to talk through the next few slides, please. Okay, so what kind of questions can you ask when you're working with a coaching approach in your classes? Just a few question stems here, okay? So what we have here is, what would you modify? How could you do this or that differently? Or what's your favorite way to learn new words? Or what's your favorite way to do gap fills? Okay, so any kind of thing. Where can you find, I don't know, information or grammar description for present perfect, let's say? Which is in what way? So keeping the questions very open. What's your experience with, I don't know, writing emails? Have you ever tried to do this and that? Okay. Is this something you would like to change or want to work with a partner or a different partner pair in the classroom? What might help you? How long will it take? Who would you like to work with? How might I support you here? Is there anything that's missing for you? So there are a lot of questions which are not teaching, but it's related to the learning process. And this is the shift that if you're wearing a coaching hat, you can have, and it's not taking particularly more time, but it's increasing awareness for the learner to make decisions about how they want to approach the material that you have in the classroom. Okay, so this is a bit of a taster of the kind of questions you could be asking. Okay, now let's move on to something that is very close to my heart on the next slide, which is how you can empower your learners. Okay, so that's really important. Let's have a look here at what I thought. I wasn't sure what kind of chat box we'd be using, but in coaching we use scaling a lot. So from 1 to 10, 1 is the relatively low and 10 is the higher value number. I'd like to ask you in 3 different categories, what is it that can empower your learners most? Okay, how much can control over content empower your learners? On a scale of 1 to 10, write a number with content. Okay, so content, write a number between 1 to 10. Same thing for receiving more positive encouragement. So if your learners receive more positive encouragement on a scale of 1 to 10, what value would that be for your learners? Is it very, very important? Is it really empowering? Then give a 10. If it's not so empowering, give a smaller number. And the last one, if you're encouraging more peer-led activities, so where they're working together, whether they're working on projects or just some pair work for a short period of time, how empowering do you think that is for your learners? So for each 3 of these, give a number. Okay, so content, number, positive encouragement, number, peer-led activities, number. And Marcella, if there's any numbers coming in the chat or coming in the YouTube channel, then I'd be very curious to see what kind of results we have today.
Okay, there is a little bit of delay. So at this point, they are still at the beginning of this slide. So it will take a little bit for them to start sharing.
That's all right. Okay.
Yeah, but
I have a breather. Okay, so
yeah, I can share my ideas with you if you want to hear them.
sure.
Yeah, I think some students like to have control over content, and I think some really don't because they feel like they don't want the trouble of being in control, because being in control means that they need to do some work, and sometimes
Oh,
they
yes.
don't want to take this responsibility. And yeah, so do you feel the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I know. But as a coach, I push them. So I say, I'm sorry, I'm not responsible for providing input. I want to know what works for you, how you can get that material, whatever, and what it is that I can support you with so that you can learn it. So I push them very much to the edge there. So I don't let them get off the hook that easily. But yeah, I know in a class, obviously it's different. So
Yeah,
okay. What
that's
about
the biggest challenge, is to get them to take responsibility. It's the accountability factor,
oh,
because I feel that students, even though they are aware of how much they need English for career purposes or professional things, they, when they are in the position of a student, they go back to the old habits and they expect to be taught. Yeah, they expect to
so
have.
coaching is challenging them, right? So
Yeah,
not letting them to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
we
Okay.
get some ideas coming here. So for
Yeah.
content, people are saying 7, 8.
Mm-hmm.
For positive, people are saying 10, 8.
Mm-hmm.
For peers, 7, 8. So 7,
Mm-hmm.
8 are the numbers here.
Right, okay. And that's usually what happens. So content and peer-led activities, that really depends on the personality, right? But positive encouragement is just so important. That always gets a very high number. So that's I've done this chat poll a few times, and that's what usually comes up. So there's always this kind of, result. So yes, being positive, I think that's one of the best things that you can do, and not criticize, too much. So the question is, and I want you to think about this, is what you can do differently to empower your learners. So what one element is it that you can move up a notch a little bit in your teaching practice? Okay, let's move on. Okay. And what we have here is I'd like to talk about how language and communication is connected. So if we can move on to the next slide. So we can be creating stronger awareness for our learners. I'm kind of wrapping up here shortly, and working with autonomous learning environments. So we want them to be independent, okay? We're going to be working on remote online collaborations and communication possibilities, okay? That's also something where not only language, but communication can be a very strong focus. And we're also looking at how to work with optimal language learning paths for each individual, okay? So that's something that needs addressing. And we know that coaching is something which is very courageous because it's adding value and it's increasing individual responsibility. And I can't emphasize this enough, that we know that students have that tendency to push the responsibility back on us, but that also means that we're doing more of the work. Now, if we're doing more of the work, then what's the learner doing? Sitting back and watching us work? I don't really think that we're in a cinema situation, okay? So we can just tell them, I mean, I know that you're enjoying the film, but the truth is you should be creating the film for yourself, not watching what I'm doing, okay? So that could be an interesting thought for your learners. Okay, now moving on, what I'd like to be looking at, yes, okay. So the thing that I think you may have come to as a conclusion here is what race. So the title that I gave actually is quite misleading. It's not a race. I honestly don't think it's about learners competing, trying to reach their goals as fast as possible. I'm not suggesting either that it should be like a cruise, but it should be much more how they can be better tomorrow. What it is that they can do to change their approach to their learning, which is going to help them to reach their goals. Okay, so it's once again one step at a time. And I heard that in I'm sorry about the names, Tania's talk a few minutes ago, one step at a time. And I think that's really what coaching is also suggesting very often, that you're not wanting to push them so much out of their comfort zone that they just start looking at, okay, so I have to get there and focus on external goals, but look deep into themselves, reflect, become more aware of where they are, what they want to reach, and build up those steps to move forward. Okay, and that's where you can support them quite a lot. Okay, so there's no race. One last thing, okay, here that I'd like to share, and it's a map. And I think as we all journey on our language learning, various journeys, I mean, there are students, the first thing that we need to establish is to build trust, to let go of that wheel, and to create milestones that help them to build their own environment in a way, and also to look at ways that you can be looking at this with courage and curiosity. So the question is where you're heading, how you're able to support, to navigate this very complex road for your learners. And I'd like to give you one or two tools that you can use on the way. Okay, so once more focusing a little bit on the practical with the next slide. It's called the language coaching wheel. And of course, you can change the categories in the pie slices as you want. And of course, you can see a car wheel there. So that's the connection. And you can just have a conversation with your learners about how their learning is affecting areas that are work related, what feelings, emotions they have about their learning, how learning a language is affecting their online rapport in other situations perhaps, or how they need to be communicating in the target language online. What kind of language skills, what kind of learning skills they have and they want to focus on, okay, specifically what values they are attaching to learning a language, okay, how do they feel about their self-confidence, what successes do they have in learning the language, and how can they work on their timing, on their plans related to language learning again. And it can be a very fruitful conversation. It can be a 30-minute conversation that you have with your learners. You can take it into class. It can work very well with groups or individuals also. With groups, it's maybe a good idea for everyone to get a slice, and then they can just present their ideas and thoughts in smaller groups, okay? So it's not a large group activity. There are also additional steps to the coaching wheel, but I'm not going into details now here, okay? So if we can go into the next slide. So I know we've got 2 or 3 more minutes. The other thing is, once again, if we're looking at this race analogy, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's the best thing that you can do, to ask them very quickly to provide feedback to you and to themselves also. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you like this activity that we did? Well, it was a 5. Okay, what can you do to make it better? So there are a lot of instances where you can be using scaling just to evaluate, to see what's going on for your learners related to the activities that you're doing in class. Okay, let's move on. And I think the best thing, of course, in coaching, of course, is that you get to ask limitless number of questions, okay? And that always energizes me because I'm curious by nature. So I just want to find out so much about the learner, but of course, in order to support them to be better. So some questions that you can start with is, what have you brought here today? what is it that you want to be working on today with me? What would you be content with? How do you wish to reach your goal? So we're pushing all that responsibility onto them. How would it look like for you if you can make your goal a reality? So instead of thinking of your goal as a goal, think of it as your reality and what you need to do to move there. What one specific step could you take in the next few days? So really pushing them into that accountability corner. And I'd like you, I think it's the last interaction on these slides, what one word is common in each of these questions? So if you're a good observer, then you're going to notice one word.
Let's wait a little.
Are there any answers coming in? And please don't say.
Yeah, no, let's just wait a little bit because they are still looking at the previous slide. There is a bit of delay with the YouTube.
All right, okay.
But I got one. Gabriella said you, and Tania also said you.
Very good. Okay. And I think that's, again, the key focus of coaching. It's about you. It's not about me. It's not about the materials. It's not about anything else in the learning environment. It's about the learner itself. And if you're focusing on the learner, your questions are going to have the word you in them. And then you know that you're on the right track with your questions. Okay. So thank you very much for the feedback. Correct. So the word is you. Okay. And I think, I think we can move on. And basically, that's what I wanted to share with everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I think we're right on time. So I've been a very good girl here with my timing and my planning. And of course, I'd love to invite you to join our programs. Our next course that we have is Elevate, which focuses on how to work on coaching practices when you're working with corporate clients, clients who work in multinational organizations or businesses, international businesses, and they need coaching support so that they can move forward to present, to have their meetings, their negotiations at a different level. And so it's a really, really complex thing that a language coach can really move in their career if this is an area that you're interested in. So I'm inviting you to join. We're starting next Thursday, so there's still a bit of time to register. And of course, we're offering a discount for anyone watching this, so that's a great thing. I'd also love to say that you can join our free talks and our YouTube channel, where hopefully we're going to be able to add this conversation, I don't know. And we're offering all our programs and all the resources and materials that we have on our website, which is internationallanguagecoaching.com. So thank you very, very much for listening. And there's one more slide, okay, one very last slide. You've been lovely, very interactive. Thank you very much for being here. If you get in touch with us, very happy to give you access to a talk that I gave recently. So it's my way of saying thank you. So I'd love to give you a nice little resource to listen to. And back to you, Marcella. Thank you very much for having me, and for everyone for listening to me.
Thank you again for being here with us. It was a great pleasure. And I'm sure all the ideas added up, and I'm sure people now have a much clearer idea of how coaching is and how we can use these tools and techniques to help our students really learn and reach their goals, because that's the point. Yeah, that's why we are here on a Saturday, learning and sharing and talking about how we can be better to our students. That's the main goal. Thank you very much. Tania is saying thank you, saying that it was very enriching, and yeah, it really was.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd also be interested if there's anyone listening, and what they might think about what's going on. So any other feedback, or if anyone would like to say something, then I'm very happy to answer any questions, perhaps if there's any time for that. I don't know.
Yeah, let's see if there are any questions. For now, they're just thanking you very much.
Any questions?
While we wait, let me just remind everyone who's watching that today in the afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock, we have the public school SIG presenting. I'm sure this is going to be very interesting. So if you are a public school teacher, be there at 2 o'clock from 2 to 6 p.m. Brazilian time. And tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. from 9 to 12, we'll have the assessment SIG. So a weekend full of learning for all kinds of interests you will find with BRAZ-TESOL. So just engage and participate as much as you can. Yeah, just thank yous and saying that it was very inspiring, which really was.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I'll be leaving then now. Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
thank
goodbye.
you, Gabriella. I hope to see you soon.
Okay, yeah, bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for being here. It was a great pleasure to be the host for today, and I'm sure there were lots of interesting things for us to apply and go deeper and study. What I really like is to get pieces of information and put them together and create new things, create tools to share. And I think that's how we improve and we help more our students. If you want to know more about coaching in ELT, we have a Facebook page where you can go and be in touch with us. And also, if you use coaching techniques and you want to share what you do in your classroom, we have a space in our SIG to share ideas. Every month we share an article or a tool, or if you want to write about your experience in the classroom, feel free to share your ideas. You can send me an email and or you can contact me on Facebook, and we can share your work with the world, yeah, and help other teachers engage in coaching as well. Also, if you want to be part of our SIG, we have some places on the board that you can fill. So if you are interested in having a bigger impact in the community and help us spread the word on coaching through the Coaching in ELT SIG, just get in touch, send us an email with your ideas, and maybe you can be part of the board and help us spread the news and reach more and more teachers in Brazil. And as you can see, everywhere in the world, because with internet, there are no limitations for as far as we can reach. So thank you very much, all of you, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. I'm leaving now, and yes, you know, there are more things going on in the afternoon and tomorrow. Bye-bye. Thank you.